The Iran Deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Vienna, July 14, 2015. Preface. The E3/EU+3, China, France, Germany, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom and the United States, with the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and the Islamic Republic of Iran welcome this historic Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, J.C.P.O.A, which will ensure that Iran's nuclear program will be exclusively peaceful, and mark a fundamental shift in their approach to this issue. They anticipate that full implementation of this JCPO will positively contribute to regional and international peace and security. Iran reaffirms that under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop, or acquire any nuclear weapons. Quote, "From the day these talks began, the United States and our partners have been crystal clear that we would not accept anything less than a good deal, a deal that shuts off all of Iran's pathways towards fissile material for a nuclear weapon and resolves the international community's concerns about Iran's nuclear program." By John Kerry. Iran envisions that this JCPO will allow it to move forward with an exclusively peaceful, indigenous nuclear program, in line with scientific and economic considerations, in accordance with the JCPO, and with a view to building confidence and encouraging international cooperation. In this context, the initial mutually determined limitations described in this JCPO will be followed by a gradual evolution, at a reasonable pace, of Iran's peaceful nuclear program, including its enrichment activities, to a commercial program for exclusively peaceful purposes, consistent with international non-proliferation norms. The E3/EU+3 envision that the implementation of this JCPO will progressively allow them to gain confidence in the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's program. The JCPO reflects mutually determined parameters, consistent with practical needs, with agreed limits on the scope of Iran's nuclear program, including enrichment activities and R&D. The JCPO addresses the E3/EU+3's concerns, including through comprehensive measures providing for transparency and verification. The JCPO will produce the comprehensive lifting of all UN Security Council sanctions as well as multilateral and national sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program, including steps on access in areas of trade, technology, finance, and energy. Quote, "We have the support of Russia, China, Great Britain, France, and Germany. If we suddenly went off by ourselves and said no to this, we're not only going to lose the support of the international community, we're going to lose the access, lose the accountability. We would have no mechanism to verify that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Without this deal, Iran could go do what it wants unchecked by the international community." By John Kerry. Preamble and General Provisions. 1. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the E3/EU+3, China, France, Germany, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom and the United States, with the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, have decided upon this long-term Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPO. This JCPO, reflecting a step-by-step approach, includes the reciprocal commitments as laid down in this document and the annexes hereto and is to be endorsed by the United Nations, UN, Security Council. 2. The full implementation of this JCPO will ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. 3. Iran reaffirms that under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop, or acquire any nuclear weapons. Quote, "Put simply, this deal has a permanent prohibition on Iran having a nuclear weapons program and a permanent inspections regime that goes beyond any previous inspections regime in Iran. Iran is obligated as a party to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, not to seek or acquire nuclear weapons, commitments expressly defined in the JCPO. Any Iranian attempt to design, pursue, build, or otherwise seek a nuclear weapon would be an explicit and detectable violation of the NPT. In the event of Iranian non-compliance, the JCPO will enable the United States to mobilize the international community to take swift action, including snapping sanctions back into place." By John Kerry. 4. Successful implementation of this JCPO will enable Iran to fully enjoy its right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. under the relevant articles of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, in line with its obligations therein, and the Iranian nuclear program will be treated in the same manner as that of any other non-nuclear weapon state party to the NPT. 5. This JCPOA will produce the comprehensive lifting of all UN Security Council sanctions as well as multilateral and national sanctions related to Iran's nuclear program, including steps on access in areas of trade, technology, finance, and energy. 6. The E3/EU+3 and Iran reaffirm their commitment to the purposes and principles of the United Nations as set out in the UN Charter. 7. The E3/EU+3 and Iran acknowledge that the NPT remains the cornerstone of the nuclear non-proliferation regime and the essential foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament and for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. 8. The E3/EU+3 and Iran commit to implement this JCPOA in good faith and in a constructive atmosphere, based on mutual respect, and to refrain from any action inconsistent with the letter, spirit, and intent of this JCPOA that would undermine its successful implementation. The E3/EU+3 will refrain from imposing discriminatory regulatory and procedural requirements in lieu of the sanctions and restrictive measures covered by this JCPOA. This JCPOA builds on the implementation of the Joint Plan of Action, JPOA, agreed in Geneva on November 24, 2013. 9. A joint commission consisting of the E3/EU+3 and Iran will be established to monitor the implementation of this JCPOA and will carry out the functions provided for in this JCPOA. This joint commission will address issues arising from the implementation of this JCPOA and will operate in accordance with the provisions as detailed in the relevant annex. 10. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, will be requested to monitor and verify the voluntary nuclear-related measures as detailed in this JCPOA. The IAEA will be requested to provide regular updates to the Board of Governors, and as provided for in this JCPOA, to the UN Security Council. All relevant rules and regulations of the IAEA with regard to the protection of information will be fully observed by all parties involved. Quote, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, advances critical U.S. interests related to preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons, strengthening global nuclear safety and security, and promoting the peaceful applications of nuclear energy. Founded in 1957, the IAEA is the global focal point for supporting the safe, secure, and peaceful development and use of nuclear science and technology. The IAEA contributes to a central U.S. national security objective, preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons. It applies nuclear safeguards consisting of monitoring, inspection, information analysis, and other activities to detect and deter the application of peaceful nuclear activities to weapons-related purposes. By John Kerry. 11. All provisions and measures contained in this JCPOA are only for the purpose of its implementation between E3/EU+3 and Iran and should not be considered as setting precedents for any other state or for fundamental principles of international law and the rights and obligations under the NPT and other relevant instruments, as well as for internationally recognized principles and practices. 12. Technical details of the implementation of this JCPOA are dealt with in the annexes to this document. 13. The EU and E3+3 countries and Iran, in the framework of the JCPOA, will cooperate, as appropriate, in the field of peaceful uses of nuclear energy and engage in mutually determined civil nuclear cooperation projects as detailed in Annex 3, including through IAEA involvement. 14. The E3+3 will submit a draft resolution to the UN Security Council endorsing this JCPOA, affirming that conclusion of this JCPOA marks a fundamental shift in its consideration of this issue and expressing its desire to build a new relationship with Iran. This UN Security Council resolution will also provide for the termination on implementation day of provisions imposed under previous resolutions, establishment of specific restrictions, and conclusion of consideration of the Iran nuclear issue by the UN Security Council 10 years after the adoption day. 15. The provisions stipulated in this JCPOA will be implemented for their respective durations as set forth below and detailed in the annexes. 16. The E3/EU+3 and Iran will meet at the ministerial level every 2 years, or earlier if needed, in order to review and assess progress and to adopt appropriate decisions by consensus. Iran and E3/EU+3 will take the following voluntary measures within the time frame as detailed in this JCPO and its annexes. Nuclear. A. Enrichment R&D, stockpiles. 1. Iran's long-term plan includes certain agreed limitations on all uranium enrichment and uranium enrichment-related activities, including certain limitations on specific research and development (R&D) activities for the first 8 years, to be followed by gradual evolution, at a reasonable pace, to the next stage of its enrichment activities for exclusively peaceful purposes, as described in Annex 1. Iran will abide by its voluntary commitments, as expressed in its own long-term enrichment and enrichment R&D plan to be submitted as part of the initial declaration for the additional protocol to Iran's Safeguards Agreement. 2. Iran will begin phasing out its IR-1 centrifuges in 10 years. During this period, Iran will keep its enrichment capacity at Natanz at up to a total installed uranium enrichment capacity of 5,060 IR-1 centrifuges. Excess centrifuges and enrichment-related infrastructure at Natanz will be stored under IAEA continuous monitoring, as specified in Annex 1. Quote, for the next 10 years, Iran will be allowed to use only the IR-1 for enrichment, the oldest and least capable centrifuges. By Ernest Moniz. 3. Iran will continue to conduct enrichment R&D in a manner that does not accumulate enriched uranium. Iran's enrichment R&D with uranium for 10 years will only include IR4, IR5, IR6, and IR8 centrifuges as laid out in Annex 1, and Iran will not engage in other isotope separation technologies for enrichment of uranium as specified in Annex I. Iran will continue testing IR6 and IR8 centrifuges, and will commence testing of up to 30 IR6 and IR8 centrifuges after 8.5 years, as detailed in Annex 1. Quote, Iran already has an R&D program for a number of advanced centrifuges, IR2M, IR4, IR5, IR6, IR8. The pace of the program will be slowed substantially and will be carried out only at the Natanz site for 15 years, under close International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, monitoring. Iran will not pursue other approaches to uranium enrichment. By Ernest Moniz. 4. As Iran will be phasing out its IR-1 centrifuges, it will not manufacture or assemble other centrifuges, except as provided for in Annex 1, and will replace failed centrifuges with centrifuges of the same type. Iran will manufacture advanced centrifuge machines only for the purposes specified in this JCPO. From the end of the 8th year, and as described in Annex 1, Iran will start to manufacture agreed numbers of IR6 and IR8 centrifuge machines without rotors and will store all of the manufactured machines at Natanz, under IAEA continuous monitoring until they are needed under Iran's long-term enrichment and enrichment R&D plan. Quote, the manufacture of centrifuges and components will be limited to the numbers of machines commensurate with the program laid out in the JCPO by Ernest Moniz. 5. Based on its own long-term plan, for 15 years, Iran will carry out its uranium enrichment-related activities, including safeguarded R&D exclusively in the Natanz enrichment facility, keep its level of uranium enrichment at up to 3.67%, and, at Fordow, refrain from any uranium enrichment and uranium enrichment R&D and from keeping any nuclear material. 6. Iran will convert the Fordow facility into a nuclear, Physics and Technology Center. International collaboration including in the form of scientific joint partnerships will be established in agreed areas of research. 1,044 IR-1 centrifuges and 6 cascades will remain in one wing at Fordow. 2 of these cascades will spin without uranium and will be transitioned, including through appropriate infrastructure modification, for stable isotope production. The other 4 cascades with all associated infrastructure will remain idle. All other centrifuges and enrichment-related infrastructure will be removed and stored under IAEA continuous monitoring as specified in Annex 1. Quote, the deep underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordow will be converted to a nuclear, physics, and technology center where specific projects such as stable isotope production are undertaken. In cooperation with Russia, Iran will pursue a limited program for production of stable isotopes, such as those used for medical applications. No nuclear material will be allowed into Fordow for 15 years. And the IAEA will have a right to daily access at Fordow as well. By Ernest Moniz. 7. During the 15-year period, and as Iran gradually moves to meet international qualification standards for nuclear fuel produced in Iran, it will keep its uranium stockpile under 300 kilograms of up to 3.67% enriched uranium hexafluoride, UF6, or the equivalent in other chemical forms. Quote, Iran will reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium by nearly 98% from 12,000 kilograms to only 300 kilograms, and will keep its level of uranium enrichment at 3.67% or below. By Ernest Moniz. The excess quantities are to be sold based on international prices and delivered to the international buyer in return for natural uranium delivered to Iran, or are to be downblended to natural uranium level. Enriched uranium in fabricated fuel assemblies from Russia or other sources for use in Iran's nuclear reactors will not be counted against the above stated 300 kg UF6 stockpile, if the criteria set out in Annex 1 are met with regard to other sources. The Joint Commission will support assistance to Iran, including through IAEA technical cooperation as appropriate, in meeting international qualification standards for nuclear fuel produced in Iran. All remaining uranium oxide enriched to between 5% and 20% will be fabricated into fuel for the Tehran Research Reactor, TRR. Any additional fuel needed for the TRR will be made available to Iran at international market prices. Quote, all of Iran's up to 20% enriched uranium that cannot be fabricated into fuel assemblies will be removed from Iran. By Ernest Moniz. B. Iraq, heavy water, reprocessing. 8. Iran will redesign and rebuild a modernized heavy water research reactor in Iraq, based on an agreed conceptual design, using fuel enriched up to 3.67%, in a form of an international partnership which will certify the final design. Quote, the Iraq reactor, which according to its original design would have been a source of plutonium for at least one nuclear weapon per year, will be transformed to produce far less plutonium than before and of a much lower quality. By Ernest Moniz. The reactor will support peaceful nuclear research and radioisotope production for medical and industrial purposes. The redesigned and rebuilt Iraq reactor will not produce weapons-grade plutonium. Except for the first core load, all of the activities for redesigning and manufacturing of the fuel assemblies for the redesigned reactor will be carried out in Iran. All spent fuel from Iraq will be shipped out of Iran for the lifetime of the reactor. Quote, all spent fuel from the Iraq reactor that could be reprocessed to recover plutonium will be sent out of the country, and all of this will be under a rigorous IAEA inspection regime. By Ernest Moniz. This international partnership will include participating E3/EU plus 3 parties, Iran, and such other countries as may be mutually determined. Iran will take the leadership role as the owner and as the project manager in the E3/EU plus 3, and Iran will, before implementation day, conclude an official document which would define the responsibilities assumed by the E3/EU plus 3 participants. 9. Iran plans to keep pace with the trend of international technological advancement in relying on light water for its future power and research reactors with enhanced international cooperation, including assurance of supply of necessary fuel. 10. There will be no additional heavy water reactors or accumulation of heavy water in Iran for 15 years. All excess heavy water will be made available for export to the international market. Quote, Iran will ship out all heavy water that it produces above the amount needed for the modernized Iraq reactor for 15 years. By Ernest Moniz. 11. Iran intends to ship out all spent fuel for all future and present power and research nuclear reactors, for further treatment or disposition as provided for in relevant contracts to be duly concluded with the recipient party. Quote, Iran will ship out all spent fuel for all of its power and research reactors, preventing Iran from accumulating spent fuel that it could attempt to extract plutonium from. By Ernest Moniz. 12. For 15 years Iran will not, and does not intend to thereafter, engage in any spent fuel reprocessing or construction of a facility capable of spent fuel reprocessing, or reprocessing R&D activities leading to a spent fuel reprocessing capability, with the sole exception of separation activities aimed exclusively at the production of medical and industrial radioisotopes from irradiated enriched uranium targets. Quote, for at least 15 years, Iran will not engage in any activity associated with the reprocessing of spent fuel, even at the R&D level. By Ernest Moniz. Quote, to those who are thinking about opposing the deal because of what might happen in year 15 or 16, remember that, if we walk away, year 15 starts tomorrow, and without any of the long-term verification or transparency safeguards that we have put in place to ensure that we prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. By John Kerry. See Transparency and Confidence Building Measures. 13. Consistent with the respective roles of the President and Majlis, Parliament, Iran will provisionally apply the additional protocol to its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement in accordance with Article 17(b) of the additional protocol, proceed with its ratification within the time frame as detailed in Annex 5, and fully implement the modified Code 3.1 of the subsidiary arrangements to its Safeguards Agreement. Quote, Iran will adhere to the additional protocol to its Safeguards Agreement with the IAEA, which provides for extensive access for the IAEA to investigate evidence of suspicious activities anywhere. In addition, Iran will provide early design information to the IAEA about facilities it wishes to construct, as soon as the decision to construct or authorize construction has been made. By Ernest Moniz. 14. Iran will fully implement the roadmap for clarification of past and present outstanding issues agreed with the IAEA, containing arrangements to address past and present issues of concern relating to its nuclear program as raised in the annex to the IAEA report of November 8, 2011, Gov/2011/65. Full implementation of activities undertaken under the roadmap by Iran will be completed by October 15, 2015, and subsequently the Director General will provide by December 15, 2015 the final assessment on the resolution of all past and present outstanding issues to the Board of Governors, and the E3+3, in their capacity as members of the Board of Governors, will submit a resolution to the Board of Governors for taking necessary action, with a view to closing the issue, without prejudice to the competence of the Board of Governors. 15. Iran will allow the IAEA to monitor the implementation of the voluntary measures for their respective durations, as well as to implement transparency measures, as set out in this JCPOA and its annexes. Quote, this deal is not based on trust. It is based on unprecedented monitoring and verification. And the duration of the agreement is indefinite. Some provisions will be in place for 10 years, others for 15, and still others for 20 or 25. But transparency requirements and Iran's most fundamental obligation to forego a nuclear weapons program are permanent. By Ernest Moniz. These measures include a long-term IAEA presence in Iran, IAEA monitoring of uranium ore concentrate produced by Iran from all uranium ore concentrate plants for 25 years, containment and surveillance of centrifuge rotors and bellows for 20 years, use of IAEA-approved and certified modern technologies including online enrichment measurement and electronic seals, and a reliable mechanism to ensure speedy resolution of IAEA access concerns for 15 years, as defined in Annex 1. Quote, many of these technologies were developed at the Department of Energy's national laboratories, which are home to America's leading nuclear experts. By Ernest Moniz. Quote, much has been made about a possible 24-day delay before inspectors could gain access to suspected undeclared nuclear sites. The I.A.E.A can request access to any suspicious location with 24 hours notice. This deal also creates a new mechanism to ensure that the I.A.E.A gets the required access and sets a firm time limit to resolve access issues within 24 days. We have very high confidence that nuclear material used for advancing a nuclear program will detect it in this time frame. By Ernest Moniz. 16. Iran will not engage in activities, including at the R&D level, that could contribute to the development of a nuclear explosive device, including uranium or plutonium metallurgy activities, as specified in Annex 1. Quote, these are important commitments that prevent Iran from undertaking certain types of R&D that, even absent nuclear materials could contribute to their knowledge of nuclear weapons and weaponization. By Ernest Moniz. 17. Iran will cooperate and act in accordance with the procurement channel in this J.C.P.O.A, as detailed in ANNEX 4, endorsed by the UN Security Council resolution. Quote, the procurement channel allows the United States and our partners insight into Iran's nuclear-related procurement activities. If we find Iran purchasing nuclear-related equipment outside of this channel, it could be deemed significant non-performance and result in the snapback of sanctions or more. By Ernest Moniz.